Welcome back to All About Apps. That is where you are. I'm your host, Peggy Ann Salz, but I'm not by myself because I have Faheem, my co-pilot for all these conversations. You are, of course, the person looking at ad tech from the inside out, but also a sixth sense for UA, retention, monetization, where it's going next. Great to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you, Peggy. Indeed, it has been a while. It's always good to take a small break, but be back with the content that is actually needed for the ecosystem. So I'm sure this is going to be another episode full of insights and delights.
Well, I hinted at it, it's all about that sixth sense of where things are going. And what better way to do that than to talk to Mariusz? Mariusz, my favorite, what we will call in the industry always our insights guy. You are the insights guy, head of mobile gaming and apps lead at Google. And you are the man who knows about game changing strategies, pun intended, raw data, community builder, angel investor, and I would say a rock star. And here you are to tell us more about where the market is going, what's working, LiveOps AI. We've read it on your LinkedIn. Now we're going to bring it into the show. It's so good to have you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here and discuss it with you. Great to be
And
here.
it's great to have you, Morris. I said, you're a legend. What can I say? Epic. So we are looking at what is next. Where are we heading? I mean, these are tough questions, to be honest, guys. So I know that it's not a one answer. It's not a simple answer, but let's start with exactly there, where we are. Studios are doubling down on live ops. Makes perfect sense. You want to get everything you can out of your existing games. But at the same time, there's the question, are we trading off on innovation, longevity? Not a lot of new games are being launched, to be honest. So is 2025 shaping up to be the year of the sequel or the breakout app? I'll start with you, Faheem.
That's a good one, Peggy, right? So, I mean, one thing that is very, very obvious is that while the trend of studios heavily investing in extending the LTV of existing games through live ops and increased long term retention is very likely to kind of intensify in 2025, just because it's, as you mentioned, right, a bit more challenging, especially to release new titles.
Mm.
Now, releasing a new title is more easier than it was ever, but releasing a title that is actually successful is where the main trade-off is, as you had mentioned, right? So basically, because the biggest aspect is the players attention. Now players have, as the day progresses, right, the attention span of the users is dropping quite significantly. When a
Mm.
user likes a game, they like it. The moment they see the slightest discomfort or something that is of an inconvenience to them, they can easily drop it off for a competitor. Because if you can just go to your Play Store, let's say, and type merge, you have over 1,000 titles under the merge genre, for example, right? So the user has a lot of obvious alternatives which they can easily pipe into. Now, because it is a bit more easy to switch the users, the cost of user acquisition is quite higher as well. So as a
Mm.
game becomes more and more stickier, the cost of user acquisition is significantly increasing. Hence, when a new studio which has limited budget, or if a new studio has just raised a pre-seed or a seed round, wants to go and compete against the big guys, the super plays, the dice dreams, the coin masters, they cannot compete at that budget level. So these legacy games, rather than committing to a sequel, they can spend their existing budgets to scale into a new aspect of things. Now there is something called as a platform favoritism, where Apple and Google know these well established games where users are making tons of in-app purchases as well, from which of course Google and app stores take their own sweet commission as well. So they want to promote these games by themselves as well. So for a new studio to compete with these studios is where they are seeing quite a bit of a challenge as well. But on the
Mm.
reverse side of things, right, the games, as you mentioned, right, creating a sequel is much more easier as well. You can cross promote your games quite easily as well. If a certain genre, if a certain narrative or an IP has already been established quite well in the market, it's rather easy for the user to adopt to it, right? So dice dreams, domino dreams, you see that, right? So for the users, it is something of a similar narrative to go by as well. I mean, recently our good friend Marius, for example, they did invest in reality games that is kind of creating a monopoly version of the game as well. Quite a very interesting idea, because the Monopoly genre is something that is very, very famous, and that unique spin-off bringing this gives the user that confidence. Hey, this genre is well established, and if you bring that element of surprise to it, that's when a new studio can easily compete with the big ones like the Monopoly goes and other vendors. So I believe it's all about the idea and how you bring it to life.
Now, Mariusz, what's the data telling us? Because, make a point there. Great monopoly, it flies, but then everyone's getting a little bit more risk averse. And I wonder if we're going to have that variety, that spice. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's like really this check and equation. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the data, I mean, the data is it's not easy, because like for example, it shows that if you look by the like in-app revenue in 2024, more than 50% of the revenue was coming from the games that were like older than 6 years. Yeah, so if we get to that point that single digit share of the revenue in 2024 was coming from the games that were published in 2024, that really shows that actually it's extremely competitive industry. And of course, it's not so much different than like overall that entertainment industry, yeah? Because if we look at the movies, if we look at the musics, it's really driven by outliers, by those like top hits that every maybe 50, every 100, you have this hit that is like driving the whole industry. And I think from the studio perspective, as Faheem was kind of mentioning, yeah, there's this trade-off that on one side you have this case when you are when I think finally you have two situations. Either you create something significantly different, significantly changing really the landscape of the industry, and then of course it has much higher risk but much higher potential outcome. Okay? People really see something they haven't seen in the past, so they are much more likely to stop the game they're playing now, or maybe add something additional to the time. Or the people they just see over kind of similar stuff, and of course then they're much less likely to stop the games, or stop the entertainment type they have and they're enjoying now. Yeah, so and that's its kind of theory. And if we follow the money, and we know that that's not the easiest times we had in the last years, and especially the investors became quite risk averse, then finally it's easier to get the financing for something that people know, something even if you look at the very established companies that have a lot of money on the bank account. A lot of them are actually going the safe way when they're just adding additional title that maybe it will extend the target audience. Okay, it will cannibalize probably a little bit the existing project, but still will add some additional revenue, because again, from the cash flow, from the P&L perspective, it's just easier to do. And I think that's we'll see more and more of those cases when Monopoly Go is good example, and it's it's a very good example. But at the same time, they were building that, as far as I remember, for 7 years. Yeah, so
Yes.
not many companies and not many people can afford to build and improve the product and the game for 7 years. I think that's more and more is really the kind of trade-off between the potential risk and potential outcome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that trade-off, I mean, it is possible that you can say, okay, then that's where we can rely on AI. It's sort of like the great equalizer is what some people are talking about. And you've been very vocal about this as well, talking about the divide on AI between Western and emerging markets. Faheem, why are we seeing this split, and what does it mean? I mean, is it about studios trying to use AI to drive engagement, or is it just like automate LiveOps, do things faster, do things better? What are you saying?
So the thing with AI is, even when we open the news, right, we read news every morning about AI. The common news that come out are usually from the Western markets, followed by the emerging markets. So now the Western markets do have their own sweet advantages, and hence they are able to use leverage AI at a much quicker pace, be it kind of using their infrastructure and access to AI at much of a faster speed. Tier one countries tend to have better data availability and regulation rules. So kind of having that historic data and letting your AI model run off that historic data is something of a common advantage as well. And of course, at the same time, kind of you have various different monetization models, especially in Western markets that we are seeing, which is kind of new for emerging markets. Like example, we have seen countries like Vietnam emerging and trying to drift towards hybrid casual, whereas the Western markets had already drifted towards hybrid casual quite a while ago. So that's what kind of sets up the floor between the Western markets and the emerging markets as well. In terms of how is AI kind of shaping the in-game advertising, there is quite a few different aspects to it. So one of them is the hyper personalized advertising, where the AI these days, as you might have seen, is able to analyze the drop off of the user. What is the conversion rate of a user? Let's say what percentage of users drop off after a certain level, and depending on that data, come up with a hyper personalized promotion. Let's say users drop off at a certain point, give them an in-app purchase that would help them boost in the game. So these kind of quick taking actions, where back in the day you have to wait for a matured cohort data, let all the data come in, analyze where you're losing the user, and then design a custom IAP booster pack and present to the new cohort of users. There was a lot of time that was being lost, which basically eats from your LiveOps strategies as well, compared to today, where you could just let your AI feed off the data, let the LLMs train themselves, and at the same time kind of give them unique advertisement material, give them their own hyper personalized IAP cashback. These basically let them help through the longer retention cycles as well. At the same time, where we have seen LiveOps included actively with the AI aspect is in terms of fraud detection. Of course, Rewarded is becoming a massive player in this game, and we have seen significant ad fraud here and there. The ad fraud industry is still losing billions of dollars each year, especially with ad tech. So these extremely sophisticated AI layers are help mitigating ad fraud, hence giving LiveOps the floor plan it needs to actually leverage its mature data cohorts and implementing that with AI to basically help scale the users at a profitable rate.
Mariusz, you look at data, you look at all the regions. What are you seeing in the realm of, for example, behavioral differences, tech readiness, a cultural openness to AI? What do you see?
I think it's like extremely interesting aspect. Like I think that like we see more and more data around that. Still very early, but from what we see from different sources, we can see that in general the emerging markets are more open towards the AI than, for example, Western markets. We can see that mobile users are more open than non-mobile users. Of course, sometimes it can be coming from demographics as well, because, for example, like if we have in many emerging markets, we have a lot of very young users that are by definition more open towards the changes. I think sometimes it can be coming from the situation that overall the people living in emerging markets are kind of, they got used more to the changes because they have much less stable political systems, much less kind of much more dynamic society. So like some those differences matter finally. And from that case perspective, there was very interesting research done just recently by GVI, for example, in Q3 around how the users look at the usage of AI in gaming. What was interesting to see, there were some specific areas they really saw as quite significant in terms of how the AI could be used. Yeah, so for example, quite important was quality control, game testing, and everything that really makes can be automated with the AI and make sure that it works. Then, for example, creation of new environment, new landscapes, new game levels, like everything that is just general for the content. All around animation, physics, and of course anti-cheat or security systems as well. And of course the personalized players experience as well, yeah, which of course includes a lot of topics related to how the users plays the game, and then finally how actually how he's happy with a specific type of monetization, yeah, because finally he will spend money once he really likes and enjoying the experience. So the better we really improving his experience over all, even those elements that I was mentioning earlier, finally he's actually more eager to spend money as well. Yeah, so I would say all those topics are kind of combined together, and I think there is this interesting element. Okay, to which extent data will be playing important role? Because I mean, if you look at the data, I think the data is way better in saying what not to do rather what to do. So I think I think that could be the difference between this AI versus traditional data analysis. Yeah. So because like in the in the traditional data analysis, you see more or less, okay, what is working, what is not working, and then based on that you can have the idea, okay, what I should really avoid, versus an AI system that system can relearn. So finally, even if you add some input, finally the outcome can be something going much beyond what you added in additionally actually initially as that input.
That's pretty cool because I mean, it matters. You know, what doesn't work is just as important as what
Exactly.
works. And, you know, there is that interesting difference, and you brought it up as well, Faheem. You know, it has to be about the attention. It is so easy to switch, to search, to find something else that it has to be sticky, and you're going to need some help with that. So AI is that tool.
Yeah, I mean, like 100%, because at the end of the day, like the day has 24 hours. Yes. So like finally we got to that percentage of the time that people spend on entertainment, on gaming, that it's harder and harder actually to add something to this people's calendar. Yeah. So it needs to be something very very significantly better versus what they saw earlier to really make them really add it as the additional element. In other cases, just rather replacing something they had earlier. Yeah. And that's, I think, is really the biggest potential coming from this AI. Is like when the experience will be so much better, so much different, that actually finally you are will not just replace the existing one, but you really add something new to your calendar.
And you also learn a lot from the non-gaming and gaming. I mean, they have a lot to learn from each other. And that's what you brought out as well in your recent report, Mariusz. You looked at finance, retail, travel apps, dropped some very strong signals, some very interesting, even controversial data points. So that was your research. What are the trends? What are the most significant trend you saw shaping user behavior in these sectors? Because, of course, that is what we can borrow from as we're shaping user behavior in the game and in the in-game advertising as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there are a few topics. The first one is, of course, like a lot of stuff that people just were like were doing traditional. It's moving to the online, like shopping or travel. Maybe like one big difference between gaming and non-gaming categories is that what we see is actually that in the non-gaming there is usually a few leading apps that are like driving the adoption of the specific use case or like specific category. I think is just the case when you have a few players like booking.com, for example, in case of travel, like Airbnb, trip.com, or Shane, for example, or Temu in terms of the shopping, like a few players that are really created so much different, better experience, usually betting on that quite significantly and much earlier than everyone else. Because I think when the user experience exists fully in the apps ecosystem, like in gaming, it's kind of obvious that, okay, in this experience, apps is the way to go. But I think in case of non-gaming, like a lot of those experiences initially were driven by web, and then at specific point someone saw as the opportunity, okay, if we see that in general this loyalty can be much higher in the app than in the web, but of course it's a little bit harder to create this significant user base on the app than on the web. I really need to bet much deeper on that, much more, and then finally it requires much more initial expense and sometimes effort, but finally create much deeper competitive advantage. Yeah. So I think a lot of elements that we see very significantly going to the app space, like for example food delivery, yeah, like really big topic overall in the last month, yeah, and we see how much actually usage, for example, travel is coming, like how many people are now ordering the taxi over any app, like Uber, Bolt, even any other taxi app. Yeah, and I think that's a little bit the big difference, that finally what we can see is that it's rarely that people have like three taxi apps, or like five travel apps for like hotel booking. Yeah, so usually in this case, in those non-gaming verticals, again, there is like specific initial higher initial expense and effort, but finally if you get into the user's phone, you get actually quite extensive competitive advantage over like other players, because actually you get quite significant base of the users who are more loyal to you, who really understand you better. Actually, they have much better connections with you, and finally you actually can have much better personalized experience with them. And actually now we have even deeper connection between this AI and apps, because again this personalization is, I think, is finally easier to deliver in apps, because you have of course much more data, users much more understanding of those users, and all those elements that used to be very deep in gaming and started in gaming, I think they are moving more and more towards the non-gaming verticals.
They learned, Mariusz. That's the point. I think they really did. I mean, when you look at commerce apps, there's some great games going on in
Exactly, yeah.
commerce
So
apps.
I think this gamification and how to really how to actually make something that is painful or maybe challenging for the people, how to make it kind of enjoyable, how actually make it fun for the people. That's really the way how actually finally those apps are trying to get more of the user's time and attention, because exactly as you mentioned earlier, it's harder and harder to get this attention, because this day has 24 hours no more, and if you get someone's attention, then in terms of, let's say, the travel app, finally probably you will not look at the three or like five other ones.
What about you, Faheem? Because you work with so many different app companies, I'd like you to unpack some of the cross-vertical learnings, but also weigh in on something a non-gaming app marketer was telling me, is that, we are focused on the conversion. It's really all about the conversion, those triggers, whereas maybe gaming apps, they have a lot to learn because they're not so focused on a conversion. They're building engagement, they're building session length. It's a different game, literally.
Exactly, right. So when it comes to gaming and non-gaming, certain basics, as Marius mentioned, remain quite the same. But then certain parts where, let's say, a non-gaming app using personalization and recommendation, they would use it to a very deep core. A simple example of that are two big competitors here in the US. We have Uber and Lyft. Both are ride hailing apps. Of course, Uber has its own audience where it has collaborated with, let's say, American Express to give out specific discounts for each month, etc. Whereas Lyft is usually for, let's say, Lyft knows you have to be at work every day at a certain time. So between that time slot, you will get discounted rides within the city, for example, right? So the ability to use your own users' data in a certain manner and designing custom promotions for them, because there is still, I recently read a report where there are still majority of the audience that use Uber and Lyft at the same time. It's just where can they find a sweeter deal? Because at the end of the day, as Marius mentioned, they will be leveraging just these two big apps to go where they want to go, because again, brand presence and loyalty is something that sticks with that. Unlike gaming, where although you might have big players, you can still kind of shift around bit, find a different merge title, find a different puzzle title, etc. Whereas in the non-gaming space, when it comes to shopping, when it comes to let's say something serious, a finance app, because finance apps are very, very sensitive. Once you go to an app like Revolut, you might maybe leave Wise. We have rarely people that might use Revolut, Wise, or all peer-to-peer apps together. Usually they stick one or the other, right? So that's where kind of finance apps these days are also trying to be more user friendly. Like 6 years ago, finance was usually done on the web. But in recent times, as you can see, the apps themselves have evolved a lot. As Marius mentioned, they need to have a very nice native app experience, because the users are doing everything on the phone, be it finance, be it doing a shopping, or be it booking a flight. Hence, these days we are seeing a lot of investments with AI as well, creating new onboarding flows, creating new journeys, for example, to basically natify the app experience. And then it comes to the idea of data privacy as well, which is another thing that the verticals like finance and travel need to log into as well. One easy thing for the social for the e-commerce apps is they are able to leverage social commerce. We did speak before that, the user's attention span has gone down quite significantly. Hence you see TikTok and Instagram reels finish within 15 seconds, and in those 15 seconds you're able to complete a buyout journey. If you were to use, let's say, a Shopify web app, for example, right during your checkout you would see a certain ad that would basically be something to, hey, how about you add this to the cart as well. So these days we are seeing e-commerce and travel brands kind of get enough user data and create certain ad slots just to upsell it to the user during the checkout journey. Now, these things were something that was a bit of well known in the gaming industry, where IAP and IAA, rewarded ads, rewarded video, was balanced out. But in the e-commerce shopping, these kind of realms, we just had the product that you used to buy. There was not much about upselling as well. And then, of course, kind of to differentiate themselves in travel apps, for example, like United Airlines, they introduced the concept of AR. So these kind of experiences, I believe, while kind of make things easier for the user, as Marius mentioned, they come at a high development cost. Of course, with the leveraging of AI, you can easily use it to get a competitor's edge at a certain cost, of course. But in the long run, it definitely makes sense to diversify these channels to ensure that your monetization, your retentions, and your user experience are all balanced out, because you already have another big competitor that could basically eat you out as well.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's competing for attention, but you bring up a really interesting point there, Faheem, is that, the experience has to be relevant, personalized, contextually relevant. And so does the advertising, the in-app, the in-game advertising. They need to maximize engagement, maximize revenue. And there are differences. There are differences that you look at a lot, Mariusz, in your research, which looks at, emerging markets, Brazil, Indonesia, where you have young and engaged audiences, maybe lower CPIs, but you do have high engagement. Walk me through a couple of these differences, because we need to also evolve to maximize engagement. What are the differences? What can we learn from where monetization?
So of course, like if we look at, if we start from the beginning, of course, like the Western markets, tier one markets, like US or like Western Europe, they have much higher share of the in-app revenue versus ads if we compare it with emerging markets. So that's it happens very often that the same game that in US has, for example, 70% of revenue coming from in-app and 30 coming from ads. It has in the Brazil 40% of coming from in-apps and 60% coming from ads. Yeah, so that's one big change. Then the second difference that we can see as well is that very often inside those like in-game advertising, the spectrum of the formats is different as well. So for example, like rewarded video is a very popular format, and it's something is a little bit something between the in-app and in-game ad, because it's like still initiated by the user. It's like very close to the small in-app. Is of course like main lever of in-game advertising overall, and it's more and more often met even in very core gaming. We see more and more games from like RPG strategy, like casino, testing this type of advertising. But again, if we look at the ratio, we usually see much higher ratio of the very simple like banner ads or even interstitials, for example, in emerging markets versus in US, because again we see that emerging users from emerging markets are more tolerant towards in-game advertising versus the Western markets. Yeah, and that's again the more we can see it as the kind of the general. The more emerging markets are usually more it's tolerant towards the in-game advertising. So that's why we see that, for example, the users, for example, from Nigeria are much more tolerant towards the in-game advertising than, for example, users from Brazil. And and them still they are much more tolerant than, for example, users from US. So that I think that it's playing a really important role in the whole like monetization model, because finally what sometimes can see that I see sometimes that for example the same advertisers are even testing, for example, higher frequency of ads per user in emerging markets like in India, Indonesia versus in the Western markets. Yeah, because again, they see much more negative correlation between the like scale of the a little bit especially more intrusive ads in games versus the retention. If we compare again Western market versus the emerging market, but still overall I think the in-game advertising is quite strong trend overall, because if we look even at the data, even in the Western markets, for example, like if we compare US, even if we compare what is the share of the revenue spent on the mobile overall in the last years, what is really driving the changes, for example, retail and CPG. And I think it really plays important role, because if we talk about the hybrid monetization as the concept, if in the game either we have the in-app or the ad from another game that is defined based on the mediation, that is defined on probability of that user to convert into in-app, it's hard to really talk about real hybrid monetization, because in this case you have money actually sent from one pocket to another one. Yes, again, either someone buys something in-app, or he has very high IPM because he's likely to spend enough. Yeah, it's kind of the same logic. Yeah, so I can give even my example of my wife. Yeah, who is has like he comes from the high income, has a few children. So if you look at the media mix, she's like the perfect target for many brands, but she never bought anything in the game. Yeah, from the mediation perspective, she has very low value in the in-game advertising. Yeah, but the more ads she will see from the CPG or like retail brands, when they look at her by their like characteristics, attributes, and they probably attribute much higher IPM and sorry, much higher CPM to her, then finally we can talk about this like much deeper hybrid monetization than we had like 2 or 3 years ago.
So it is a coming trend. And I mean, the universal is, as we were discussing, Faheem, personalization and having a great experience in the game and in the in-game ads. What are you seeing that works, doesn't work? Do you weigh in and agree with Mariusz that it's really looking to be that hybrid model going forward?
Yeah, definitely. It's because the tier one markets have already adopted to the hybrid model, as Marius mentioned, right? Because the vast, when you log into your CRM tool and you see the breakdown of your demographics, it is actually really, really interesting, right? So you do have a certain demographic that will absolutely buy that in-app purchase boost, and a demographic that will definitely buy that kind of, the second boost, but a demographic that only watches ads. So that's why hybrid has been where kind of, you can get the best of both worlds together. In emerging markets, especially in the past 6 months, we as AppSamurai, we have been growing actively in Vietnam, right, in partnership with GameGeek. So that is a very new emerging market for us. So the dynamics when we speak to game developers and game publishers is very, very different from the dynamics of the tier one as well, because even right now for them the main aspect of revenue is via in-app ads, because the audience, the local audience, is much more at ease to consume those ads, and these ads have significantly higher eCPMs as well. The idea with these ads is these ads are very finely curated at a localized stance. So these are like highly local ads with cultural nuances, local trends, popular references that the young kids and the young audience might understand, etc. So that is when you have these kind of highly immersive ads, especially with AI now, where you can design these ad creatives in full style. They have seen significantly higher increase in the amount of users actually completing the ad watch ratio as well. So for these kind of emerging emerging markets, definitely they still have a long way to go, but going hybrid is where in the next few years or so you will have a common point across both the emerging and the emerged markets on together as well. What is
Mm-hmm.
being done differently in the emerging markets is they are using a lot of these community driven advertising as well. So let's say in Brazil, Vietnam, India, Kwai is a massive social app, for example, where influencers are a lot into gaming and also B2C ads as well. So these kind of platforms are being used massively in tier 3 countries because these apps are massive on Android, of course, and Android being a leading OS in these emerging markets. So these kind of unique partnerships with unique influencers and localized brands makes the users feel much at home. So without having to spend that extra money because of the economic conditions, just by watching ads, just by consuming enough ads and having enough credits to buy a boost, is somewhere you have seen the emerging markets kind of growing much quicker than the
Mm-hmm.
Western markets in terms of the in advertised revenue as well.
Excellent. So what we're hearing is, yes, it is about hybrid, and there are splits across specific regions, but universals in here as well. Personalization and the
Mhm.
role that we will see where AI fits and where it doesn't fit, and where monetization is real and what it looks like in the real world, and those differences. I mean, it's all about the nuance, I think. Um, Thank you so much, both of you, Mariusz, Faheem, for your
Thank you.
insights, for the real talk, for the look into what is working and what isn't, and above all, the trend just over the horizon. Thanks again for joining. We're all about breaking down the data and the trends so you can build better apps, build better games, and succeed more with them. And of course, speaking of more, well, there is a lot more to come. So hit the subscribe button on Spotify or YouTube, whether you're listening or viewing. We are here for you. We've got more sharp takes coming your way. And next time, we delve into Web3. So see you on the next episode.